Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HuntScience podcast. I'm your host, Eric Lance, a professionally certified wildlife biologist and natural resource professional, college professor, and owner of Land Source Consulting. The HuntScience podcast is dedicated to bring you the latest information on popular habitat management topics, wildlife science, hunting strategies, and the general conservation and land management practices to help preserve our natural resources. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to have you with us and hope that you enjoy today's episode. With that said, let's get started. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our primary sponsor, Land Source Consulting. Land Source Consulting is an Ohio-based wildlife and land management consulting company that I own and operate not only here in Ohio, but through the Midwest and beyond. At Land Source, we work with private landowners just like you to build and develop those property-specific management programs to help bring the goals that you have on your property to life. If you're interested in getting more information on who we are and how we can help you, please visit us over at landsourceconsulting.com. There you can check out the different service packages and capabilities that we can provide. We would love to hear from you, so don't hesitate to reach out to us and schedule that free consultation either through our website, or you can reach out to us and connect with us on our other social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. That's landsourceconsulting.com, building relationships for a more sustainable future. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the HuntScience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Eric Lance, and today I am joined by William Thompson. Is it okay to call you Bill, or do you want William?
Yep, Bill. Yep.
All right, so
Thanks,
Bill from Spartan Forge. Bill, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you, Eric?
Good. So I want to thank you for coming on. I know we kind of put this together kind of, quick, and so I found you because you have an app, the Spartan Forge app, that is a hunting and mobile-based, map application, for us as outdoorsmen and hunters. So I downloaded the app, paid for it, everything like that. I'm just going to put that out there for everyone. So I was really impressed with this, and I do have a GIS background, and I have Onyx, and I've tried, HuntStand and HuntWise. I've tried all of them, and this one, just the user experience was a lot more intuitive, and it was a lot more friendly, at least in my opinion. So I reached out to you. Here we are. So how you doing?
Good, man. Good. I appreciate you having me on. And user experience, and you saying that you use other ones, it kind of requires some deprogramming because obviously people have only been using, there's a couple of the ones that have been around kind of forever. So people, without knowing it, have kind of programmed themselves on how they expect mapping applications to work. I kind of took a different, I guess my ethos was everything. I want to be able to do everything in the application in less than 3 clicks. So, when you're using an application, sometimes bad user design will require you sometimes, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 clicks. To invoke a particular state, and I was trying to do everything less than 3. So, the experience I have with users kind of goes like this. I don't understand quite how to use the app yet, and I'll send them a video, or they'll just spend some more time using it. And then usually a week or two later, they get back to me and they're like, "Man, I enjoy it. So this is so much it's so much better because I can get so much more done in such a less amount of time, less clicking, less looking around." In order to invoke something like property data on one of the other apps, I think you're looking at a minimum of 5 to 7 clicks. On ours, you can do it in 3. And that's, I think, one of our longest pull in the tent from a functionality standpoint. So I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying the experience for it so far.
Yeah, it's been really good. And like I said, I was asking you some stuff, before we started here, some stuff that I needed clarified. So and it's super, super simple. Once you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So, so with all my guests, I always kind of, backtrack a little bit and say, okay, who are you, where you're from, how'd you grow up in the hunting world? What led you to the path of, developing an app or wanting to develop a mobile-based map application for hunters?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. I kind of just hunted culturally growing up. I grew up in the Midwest in North Dakota, actually about 10 miles from the Canadian border. It was just something we kind of did every year. It wasn't really anything I got super into. My brother-in-law actually put me on my first bow hunt, and I was kind of addicted from that point on. And I really should look at the exact year that I started bow hunting, but I want to say it was maybe 2009 or 2008. I can't quite remember, but so 15, 16 years. Um, and well, I was in the military. I joined the military in July of 2001 is when I enlisted, and I was a military intelligence officer, and a lot of the work that I did was essentially pretty similar to what I'm doing in Spartan Forge right now, um, on net operations, application development, other intelligence disciplines that I worked in, and I just noticed like a lot of similarities between what commanders needed in order to prosecute their targets, and their effects during the global war on terrorism, as what kind of like a hunter needs whenever they want to prosecute effects for hunting a white-tailed deer or any species. And so my job as an intelligence officer is to kind of help make those informed decisions for the battlefield commanders and now for hunters by identifying all the repositories of information conducive to conducting an operation, or in our case, a hunt, and presenting it to the user. So that's kind of the essence of Spartan Forge. First blush, it kind of looks like a mapping application. It's really a planning application. So it allows people to do a lot more than drop pins, and do measurements or to navigate. There's more in there and more coming in the future that I kind of related as a planning application, instead of a mapping application.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, just from the short time that I've been digging into it, like I told you, I think I downloaded about 2 weeks ago. Been playing around with it. So, me being a biologist, I'm out in the field a lot. So I've been, taking points and kind of as I travel different parts of the state and just, looking at different things, just playing around with it, doing the tracking feature, doing the areas of interest and the polygons and, looking at the weather data and just kind of trying to get a feel for the app as much as I can in a short period of time. So, for those of you who are watching this, if you keep seeing me look down, I have the app pulled up right now. So as we go and kind of ask some questions and kind of stimulate my thought there a little bit with that. But yeah, that's the way you describe that makes perfect sense when you talk about your background in the military and making it more of a planning app rather than a mapping application, because, as we move into this, eventually I want you to really dive into, as much as we can within the time constraints that we have, the Intel section of this app, because I think at first glance, if you were to download this app, is kind of, I think the free trial that you guys have or whatever. I think on the surface level, you don't appreciate what all is actually in there. If you just kind of look at the intel and like, okay, yeah, there's weather. Okay, I see some movements and patterns. There's the weather data and then the breeding and, rut dates, stuff like that. If you're just browsing through there real quick, on the surface, it kind of looks like a lot of your other typical applications. But that's why having you on, I wanted you to dive into this because I think there's a lot of really good information in there.
Yeah, so I can start on the Intel tab, and I'm actually have it brought up myself here, and I'll just kind of go through, kind of like what the high points for me are. So, when I was hunting, oftentimes I'd be using between 5 and 8 different applications to plan and orchestrate a hunt. And it was always a pain in the butt to go everywhere and find all of this stuff, and kind of get things planned up. So I identified all of those different pieces of information, and kind of wanted to combine them in one place. So on this Intel app here, we just have kind of like a gist of what the current weather is. You have your wind direction, you've got your dew point, you've got your humidity, you've got your percent chance of precipitation for the day. You have sunrise and sunset, first light and last light, the moon overhead, moon underfoot, moon rise, and moon set. So that's kind of all of the first data that people are looking for, which already, I think is presented in a way on this first title card that's just, front and center for people. Under that, you have forecasts. So what we have here and some of the work that I did in the military was devoted to artificial intelligence, and I still do separate artificial intelligence work in other domains, but for the purposes of Spartan Forge, I started collecting color GPS data from whitetail deer movement and biological surveys. So I'm sure you know a thing or two about these, but essentially a researcher will collar whitetail deer with GPS collars, send them out into the wild for a year or 8 years. We've got data that goes up to 7 or 8 years, and we've got data that's as short as 6 months. But essentially all of this data is what I call truth data. And what we've done is train an artificial intelligence to kind of recognize the patterns in white-tailed movement data, and then then project that on a future state. So like a neural network sounds kind of like a crazy term, but really it's an artificial intelligence algorithm that is a pattern recognition machine, and the digital structure is modeled after the function of a human brain. So just like a human brain, there's interconnected nodes, there's neurons. In this case, we have artificial neurons. They process and transmit information through weighted connections. That's the easiest way to think about it. So this neural network here is looking at the nearly 2,000 years of collared deer data that we have. And people say, we haven't been collaring deer for 2,000 years. I mean that's added up. So if you have one study of 10 deer for 2 years, you've got 20 years of collared deer data. If there's 10 deer over 2 years, you've got 20 years of it. So we've got about 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years, or maybe we're over it now, of collared deer data. We take that and we normalize the data and use it to train artificial intelligences. And these AIs right now kind of demonstrate or predict where deer will be in their areas, and you can see it inside the application by clicking those eyes, like what a core area is, what transition area is, or full range areas. And we show GPS data, live or real GPS data to kind of encompass that for people. And then the pattern is just, you can think of it as how deer move throughout their environment, and the routes that they take and the patterns that they take, and that's heavily reliant on things like wind direction, wind velocity, cloud cover. But all of those things go into this AI, and then this AI makes predictions. And we can test the AI as opposed to other prediction networks. We actually used the collared deer data to train this thing, and then we can actually evaluate its success based on collared deer data that we've never seen, which I think kind of sets us apart in that I can actually test this thing and see that it has 67% accuracy. And it averages 67%. Some places it's upwards of 70%. Some places it's as low as 62, 63%. So that's the AI piece there, and we have 2 more AIs coming out this summer I can talk more about later. Below that, we have kind of like a temperature, real temperature and real field temperature, and then pressure gauge. It's got kind of a slider. Some guys like to use the heuristic or the kind of good enough rule that if you have rising pressure and lowering temperature, you're going to see deer movement. From a GPS collared deer data perspective, I only see that being accurate sometimes, not all the time, but still guys like that information presented, so I put it in there. Below that, we have the moon phases. Then below that, we have daily forecasts. If you click the plus over on the side there, it gives you the hour by hour. And then below that, we have rut dates. So the rut dates here, guys will say, a lot of people will contact me and say, well, you have on your website, November 11th is the best rut date. And I think you'd probably be able to speak to this better than I would, but I'll take a stab at it first. But essentially, you have your peak of breeding, which most people consider to be kind of like the lockdown phase of the rut, where you're actually not seeing a ton of movement because a lot of the rutting bucks and does are occupied with breeding. So you won't see a lot of movement, but what you will see is a lot of movement like 2 weeks leading up to that peak rut date. So what hunters, when they say the rut or the rut is on, they're actually talking about the seeking and breeding phase of the rut, seeking and chasing phase of the rut, which is not actually the peak breeding dates. And depending on where you are in the U.S., can kind of extend that timeline. And then we have the second peak of breeding dates. Again, I back that data up with if I have collared GPS data in the area, we bear those numbers out and those dates out from the collared GPS data. So if you scroll back to the top of the screen now, you'll see a tab that says historical. Under the historical there, it's just a polar plot, which is a way of representing wind data. And the spikes are just, again, this confuses people, but I try to keep this consistent from a meteorology perspective, in that if you see a spike pointing towards west, then that means you have a west wind, which is to say there's a percentage assigned to that. And so if you have a spike, and you can see kind of the percentages on the polar plot scales with percentages. If you have a spike towards the 21% on west, then there's colors inside of that spike. You can tell what the wind speeds are. And this is historical data for all of the US that we have. And you can go historical, like over the past few years, you can go over the past few months. And that's really handy for when you're doing digital scouting on a spot that you don't have access to understand what the prevailing winds are in an area. And then there are kind of quick clicks you can do to see last 4 weeks, last 3 months, or you can hit that little calendar, then pick a period. And that just shows you, in this area, the prevailing wind is a west-south wind. But if you plan on hunting there in, say, November of next year, you can click November, and then you can change it, and you can say, okay, well, now it's actually a southwest wind. And that can just help you kind of eliminate areas you want to hunt or not hunt or scout whenever you're doing out-of-state scouting or you're going to be going into a place cold. To understand that data, for me, is extremely important and has been a key to my success over the years. And I've been getting it historically. That data I get from pilot planning resource websites, where pilots are trying to understand when they're making flight plans for historical winds and stuff like that. That's where I've gotten that data in the past. But again, we've centralized it here inside of the application. And then after that, you have the Intel tab. So the Intel tab is, again, data that I look into whenever I'm going to do out-of-state hunts, or when I was in the military, if I knew I was getting stationed somewhere else, I'd always be trying to look up these types of information. So we went out and grabbed it for all of the whitetail states. And essentially it just tells you about the largest tracts in the area, the notable tracts of land, notable by, these are where Pope and Young, the majority of Pope and Young or Boone and Crockett deer are getting taken on public land. The number of hunters, the number of harvests among those hunters, the success ratios, the percentages of who uses archery, who's on firearms, who does muzzleloader, who participates in which season, what the doe buck ratio is if the biological data is presented. It talks about the records, and then from there you can go click the browse tab, and then you can actually look through and you can see pictures of the deer browse in the area. And we're updating this and overhauling it for next year. It's actually going to get a lot more intuitive. And we're introducing new AIs in this area as well that is going to help hunters whenever they're scouting in the field. And we do that for all of the whitetail states too. So a lot of legwork, a lot of groundwork on identifying all of these species, and a lot of work with deer biologists and other people in the academic realm to kind of create this all-encompassing thing for hunters. So that's the long and the short there of that Intel tab.
Yeah. So a couple questions. So since we're on the Intel page, so looking at this, my first question I'm sure people probably have. So does this data, let's say I drive and I'm going out of town to West Virginia. I mean, is this data going to automatically populate if I go back to my map and wherever I put where my location is, then I go into Intel, and if I go over to the state, it'll automatically update to where I am, and it just
so wherever those crosshairs are,
okay,
on the map is where it's going to give you the Intel tab for the state. So like
awesome.
Right now I'm located in West Virginia, and I have it in West Virginia, so it's showing me West Virginia data.
Gotcha.
If I zoom out and I go to South Dakota,
gotcha,
and then I push the Intel tab button, now I'm going to be getting in the Intel and the briefing for and look at that, South Dakota's got a full range of day today.
Do you yeah, it's just interesting because I look at this, like the NDA, like the deer report and stuff that gets issued every year. It's a good resource to get all this data, but to have it here too, like that's pretty cool. Yeah, like I said, looking at this when I was really starting to kind of dive into this Intel tab, I was like, man, like there's a lot of data, in here. Yeah. And then I'm assuming, so when you have, let me go back here. So under the forecasts tab, going back down to the rut dates, I'm assuming that will kind of change also. Like if you're in Florida or wherever, is it all pretty much standard, or is it kind of, like, because their rut's going to be different than ours, type
we
thing.
have rut data down to the county and sub-county level for everyone in the U.S.
Nice. Yeah, it's like I said, when you said it's a planning app, I mean, it hits a nail on the head. I mean, because I'm just thinking, my God, I mean, even looking waterfowl hunt, deer hunt, like whatever it is, I mean, you could literally sit on here and plan, all of next week or whatever it is, going on a hunt. Now, of course, I live in Northeast Ohio, which the weather is about as consistent as, nothing. It changes. It's 14 degrees right now, and it could be 50 degrees tomorrow, and people wouldn't be surprised. So, but still, like, the Intel, like I said, I know you went through it, and people listening, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot, but when you start really diving into this thing, there's a lot of information you can get on here. So I think that section's pretty cool and something that, people are really going to enjoy, and it's definitely going to be beneficial. I mean, there's no way it's not.
Yeah. And the information's getting more concise next year. We're adding a lot more stuff. We've hired a full-time researcher to assist me on all of this stuff. So it's not just me pulling this data anymore. We've got a team of people doing it.
Nice.
We've got 2 part-time researchers and 1 full-time researcher now. So
That's
This is going to
awesome.
get a lot more robust next year.
So yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the map feature. So if people pull this up and you actually go to the maps, you can go on here and obviously you can have your aerial base map, clicking on the maps itself, and you have the 4 different options: satellite, hybrid, topo, and then the custom map. You got 2D and 3D variations. I mean, all these different types of things that you see that are just vastly useful. I mean, the 3D, if maybe you're just not comfortable looking at contours and you're like, hey, I want to see a 3D and see a draw or, a ridge line or something like that. I mean, all that stuff is just, like you said, it makes sense. Again, listen to you 3 clicks away. Like, it's less than 3 clicks. It's right there. Like
Yep.
it's a good user friendly setup that I like. So that's really good.
It does require reprogramming though, because people, they've used other applications where they're just used to it and that's the way they've seen it. So I generally, like I said, people will say at first, like, I wish it kind of like worked more like an OnX or a HuntScience or something. And then after about 2 weeks of using it, they're like, I can't imagine going back to the way that I used to do this before.
Yeah. I mean, like, I just clicked not the contours, the parcel data to come on. And, the one nice thing too is obviously, not reinventing the wheel here, being able to place icons on the map and mark, locations and things like that. But the one thing that was really cool and it's super easy is, when you click on that landowner or the parcel, owner's, information, just being able right there to have all the information and then go, hey, yeah, I am permitted to like hunt on there. And that saves, like, that's super cool. And it's one of those features where you're like, I didn't even know that was a feature I needed, but now that you have it, like, just being able to go into my content and go, yeah, okay, I can zoom out and go, okay, these are all the areas that I have permission on, and just the way it organizes is really nice.
Yeah, and then you can also, the other thing people don't know about until it happens to them, because they'll often text me and ask me what's going on. Sorry, somebody is yelling at my door here. I have to go check and see what's going on. Sorry. Anyway, but what I was saying was, what a lot of people don't realize is they also need to be marking properties that are red. So when you get denied access to a property, whether you want to use it to go into an alternate piece of public land or you want to hunt someone's land, you can mark that property red. We update our property data 4 times a year. Now, that doesn't mean people ask that question. They're like, well, I bought property a year ago. It highly depends on if the county updates the public records. So if the county doesn't update the public records and we go to pull the new data and it's not updated, that's why. But anyway, the other thing is, you mark it red. When that property gets sold and it changes, that property will turn purple. So you can go back and request access again.
Yeah, that feature to me too was a big one, because I'm getting ready to start a multi-year waterfowl research project. And, going through looking at this and being able to mark icons. So we're going to be looking at, henhouse nesting structures and just some things related to that. So putting these things up in multiple locations, and going on and being able to, obviously, again, not reinventing the wheel, but, being able to say, okay, here's public land, here's private land, but being able to go on there for me to say, hey, I don't have access, like you said, over here, like being able just to quickly look at this and go, as my maps pulled up, and go, oh man, like, okay, I'm getting closer there, rather than, anything else. Cause I'm going to be looking at this thing a lot, with that. So being able to say, yeah, we have access here, and I could even break it down to where, yeah, I have access in terms of, my study area versus non-access for my study area, type of thing. So for me, as a biologist and a researcher, like, those are useful tools that, keep me away from, Google Earth and trying to, KMZ files and transfer, just all that stuff, where I can just do it, here.
Yep. And then you kind of talked about it before with the 3 clicks, and a lot of people don't realize it, but there are a couple of little cool things. If you, there in the corner, I call it the E tool, but it's the compass with the wind direction thing around it, and then the wind velocity.
Yeah.
If you long hold on that, you can drag it to either side of the screen.
Yep.
So what I wanted there was people to be able to have one thumb functionality. So you can, your thumb can essentially access about 80% of the app's features through that. You can also click it once and you get your tools. But then if you double click it, it drops a pin in the middle of the screen. So there's a couple things just people don't realize. But then the last thing is if you swipe over it, it will load up pre-configured maps for you and allow you to have your configured map inside of your Lambda. So if you have a highly configured map, say you want to have hill shade, property ownership, 20-foot contour lines, and you want to use satellite 3 because we have 4 different imagery servers or imagery layers. So you've highly configured that map. Well, if you just want to see topo quick, on other applications, you're talking about like 20 or 25 clicks if you want to go back to topo, or if you want to have that setup configured. But in this, you just have to swipe over it once and you're right at the topo. And then you can swipe back to your configured map. So it's very quick.
So it's almost like a joystick on a controller.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you can go to, we just have, pre-configured ones. So there's like a hybrid map and a hybrid imagery. There's topo, there's straight imagery, and then there's your configured. And then we're going to introduce more Lambdas later. So you can have like 2 or 3 highly configured maps if you want them.
I gotcha.
Depending on, and just like I said, once you kind of get used to doing things that way, it's a lot easier. Then when you're on that Lambda, you press that gear. You have, your 4 different imagery sets. You can turn on a hybrid overlay and you can toggle the opacity of it. You can have your data that you want to overlay. And this is going to get an upgrade here over the spring and summer as well to introduce more layers and more functionality.
Yep. Yeah. Like I said, I mean, looking at all the stuff that I can actually map on here pretty easily, is going to be big for me, what I do, not only on the hunting side, but even on like the field side when I'm doing, scouting. I mean, just going in here too, all the different icons and my content that you can put in here. I mean, everything from, I was looking at the icons you guys have available, and there's a lot. I'm not even going to be able to even remotely hit a percentage of them on here, but people looking at that, I mean, go in there and look, when you drop an icon, like just the different ways you can label it. I mean, you really can map out a property, as far as different indicators of animal sign, whether it's deer, pheasant, duck, whatever it is. I mean, you can just, there it is, and start zooming out and make that overhead picture. If it's a rub line, scrape line, whatever it is, if it's, trails, the whole 9 yards. I mean, that was another thing too. And like you said, it's all right there. I don't have to go digging for it.
Yeah. And that was kind of like what I wanted, because I noticed on other applications, like they might have like a rub icon or a scrape icon. But then I was like, is this a primary scrape? Is this a secondary scrape? Is this a fresh scrape? Is it a competition scrape? And then when you're kind of zoom out and you're taking a look at that macro view of the property, having that understanding when you're looking at it, to me, kind of points things out that you, especially when it comes to like hub activity or where activity is converging, having those different types of icons is hugely important from a planning perspective.
Yeah. I like the, yeah. And then, I mean, just looking through here, I mean, there's so much to break down. I mean, I mean, you just got to, people just have to go through here too and just play around with it. Go on your property, mark it out. I mean, even it's nice being able to save the polygons too, making a polygon and say, hey, just for future projects, like you were talking about too, for planning, right? Hey, you know what? I walked this area. I think this might be a good food plot. I'm going to map this out, maybe make some strips, out here, save it as different things, what I plan on planting. And, again, look at that macro view and, I mean, hell, take a screenshot and send it to a buddy. Like, here's what I'm planning on doing, type of thing for ease of access. Yeah. So that was something that I really liked because, again, I use these applications and I always find shortcomings no matter which one I try. I'll find something that I really like. I'm like, yeah, it works good, but hey, I wish I could do this. I wish I didn't have to go searching and download this state and, have to do all this and then just wait. And I'm like, shit, I don't have very good signal right now. Like, okay, Hanaki, just those types of things to where, there's always something. I think everyone's always like, there's that one thing everyone always thinks they can make it better is what I'm getting at, but now having an app where a lot of the things that I've run into in the past, is able to be done within that app. And again, within a kind of ease of a 3-click, world is, I mean, from the user standpoint, I mean, I think that's the name of the game.
Yeah. I mean, all of those things, putting all of those things together and making it easily usable when I was putting the application together, you have the ability to just drop points and be really simple with it, and you have the ability to go really deep and spend a lot of time doing analysis and parsing different things out. You talked earlier about sending a screenshot to your buddy. In probably a week or two, we're testing it right now. We'll be releasing. We were going to release in December, and I just figured with the end of the season coming, it really wasn't the right time to release new functionality. I want to get people to have the off season to kind of use it and learn it well. So we wanted to button it down and make it really, really tight. And we call it Blue Force Tracker. But essentially, if you and I hunt the same property, just like you do right now with the property annotation feature, where you click the property and you reflect your access, you'll be able to click the property and then share it. And then so what will happen is if you and I are hunting the same lease or the same public land, it doesn't matter what it is, I click that name and then I initiate the Blue Force Tracker function, and then you and I will be auto sharing location and pins anytime we're inside of that property. And then whoever initiates it can choose whether certain pins are being shared or not. The administrator can kind of hold back some pins or do what have you. But you know, if you have a kid and your kid's hunting with you in a separate spot, as long as you have service, you'll be able to see where they are. You'll be able to share objects seamlessly. There'll be no friction like having to share 100 points, you know, texting them all through the phone or sharing them via Bluetooth connection. It'll just do it automatically. Be super useful for granting access to people, to seeking access to alternate properties, for deer drives, all of that type of stuff. It's going to make it a lot easier to do that kind of seamless sharing. So.
Yeah, it's awesome. I was listening to you on another podcast. Is this the same thing as I heard you mention a possible feature coming up that, you know, like I got a particular property that I don't own the property. My buddy owns it, to where they'll be able to have a free version or whatever, and it'll be able to tell them when I'm out there actually hunting. So, you know, they're not, you know, going out and doing whatever.
Yeah, if they're a free member or if they're like a property owner, you can just have them download the free version of the app and they'll be able to see your location and when you're on their property. But they won't be able to share any objects with you.
Okay.
If they're a paid version member, then they're able to share objects, push things to you. But that free version is so if you're having a hard time getting access to a property, they've had bad experiences with hunters or whatever, you can say, look, download the Spartan Forge app for free. You can see anytime I'm in the back of your property. You can see what pins I'm laying down, where I'm hunting, what I'm doing there. That way, if you have kids playing in the back or whatever, it kind of buys down risk.
Nice. Yeah, I thought that was a cool feature because, you know, the one property my buddy owns, you know, I really haven't hunted there in probably about 5 years. He doesn't own, so he owns a pretty good significant amount of land there, but also surrounding is a much bigger piece. Everybody and their brother is hunting back there, you know, and the landowner just lets everyone, I mean, basically you just got to say, hey, can I hunt back there? And everyone, you know, is hunting back there. So for me, I'm like, man, you know, 5 years ago, I used to hunt back there and, you know, had good success. Saw a lot of movement and everything like that. And was one of my good spots, but then, you know, pressure, increased pressure. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey man, like I don't see deer out here as much as I'm like, yeah, go out at night with a spotlight and you'll see plenty of them, you know, type of thing. It's just, I've passed 5 stands in just this little section and, you know, I see people out there. So being able to coordinate with everybody that, you know, me and a couple people that he gives permission to, and then, you know, with those guys and trying to get again, you got to get everybody on the same page as far as that goes. But that's a real useful tool if you're a hunting co-op, if you're all in the same lease. You know, you got 10 guys that are in on a big lease and, you know, people hunt different times and, you know, I don't know when I'm going to be able to get down there, and you can look, say, hey, you know, so-and-so is already down there. We need to go to this different area. Again, it's a planning app. You can plan your app and say, okay, here's where I'm going to go. You know, I can't get a hold of my buddy. He's not answering me, but shit, I'm just going to look and see, you know, where he's at, you know, based on this. So I think those are features that, you know, when you, again, at the surface level, you know, anybody who just downloads this app, you know, like I did, I'll be fully, you know, transparent. You know, I heard about the app and I was like, yeah, man, I'll give it a whirl. Like I said, I forget where I heard it, but, you know, spending the $30 or $39, whatever it was for the year, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, even if I hate this thing, I'm like, I'm only out $40 for the year and I just won't renew it, you know, type of thing. So I always give something a chance. And then when I, like I said, started digging into it, at the surface level, like I said, you know, I was like, yeah, it's a good looking app and everything's pretty user friendly. But then I started digging into the intel and I'm like, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff on this thing, you know, and that's when I connected with you. So
Yep. Yeah, that's always been my kind of intent from the beginning is it can be as simple as you need it to be. If you're just hunting with your uncle and you want to drop him some pins, he wants to walk the pins, it can be that. But if you want to do a lot of long lead planning and really have a good digital understanding of an area or a property before you go in there to scout, you can do that as well. And really understand everything about the area that you're walking into and what the tendencies of the deer might be as a result of that. And then, as we move forward, we'll be moving, just doing stuff for other species, features for other types of and modes of hunting. We're introducing a lot of Western based features going into next year that I think are really going to, I hate the term, but game changing features that have not been done in any other applications that are really going to, I think, set us apart.
Nice. Yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's just so much to cover on this. Probably we could probably talk for another couple of hours. But so looking at this, let's kind of change here a little bit. We probably should do this in the beginning a little bit, but it really doesn't matter. So how long have you been How long has the app actually been out in full production?
A year, in November. In November,
Okay, so
so it's been
a
a
year
year
and
and
some
a few
change.
months. Yep.
So what was it like? I mean, hearing your background seemed. I mean, I'm sure it was getting this thing going was a lot of work, but most people you kind of see like was it just a guy out of his garage just decided to start an app, but you having a background in that. But what were some of the things and the challenges and the things that after the beta that you kind of ran into that maybe didn't expect or what was it as challenging I guess as what you thought once you really developed it, or was the user feedback pretty good right out the gate?
Yeah. So user feedback kind of depends on the user. I mean, the things that kind of, um, I guess, like when I was building applications and tools for the military, you kind of control the environment and you control the systems and the platforms that the systems sit on, that the software sits on. Um, when you're building an application that's going to go out into the world, there are, you know, 50 different types of Android phones that run the Android operating system, and every one of them have their little nuances. So you have to test on lots of different phones. It's a little easier on Apple, um, but there's a lot of testing and integration issues that are present there that I hadn't seen in the past. But then also, just the things that you think are going to be important to people don't end up being important. And then the things that you don't think are going to be important, you hear a ton about. I guess one, um, I guess one of them for me that was kind of surprising was just the sharing pins aspect. Like right now inside of the application, wherever the crosshair is, you get a lat long. You click that lat long, it'll copy it to a paste, like a clipboard. Then you can go into a text and you can copy and paste it and send it. Like that to me was good. Like it's pretty much how I use sharing pins in other apps. Is I just say, hey, this is a scrape. Here's the lat long. It's 8 digits. Here it is. This gets you to a 5 meter area. This is where the scrape is. And people wanted to be able to text pins. So, that was kind of one where I didn't expect it. So we will, over the spring here, we'll come out with functionality where you're able to click the pin, click share, and then you can, send it as a text message to someone else like you would other ones. I got way more. That was like probably my number one like request from people, which for all of the stuff that we're doing, that really didn't seem like it was going to
Yeah.
meet muster for one of the number one requests. But so it's just the market is like a big and beautiful thing, but it's very difficult to predict against like what's going
Yeah.
to be important and what's not going to be important to people. And I kind of thought my assumption kind of was everyone hunts like I do. And so everyone's going to want things in the way that I want things. And as the product owner, that's how we developed the first instantiation of the application, which, it's a totally different application from when it came out a year ago. A year ago when we came out, we just kind of wanted some of the Intel stuff on there. We wanted pins, we wanted imagery, we wanted property owner data. But we really wanted to get that AI out there so that people could see and evaluate the AI. And we get like, most of my messages are about people who just said, "Hey, I decided to just trust the artificial intelligence, even though it didn't look right to me. Um, I decided to just trust it and hunt when I thought it was right to hunt, based on what the AI was telling me." And people overwhelmingly come back positively and say this thing, didn't steer me wrong. And you were right; it was right around like 65, 70% of the time it was correct. and it allows people to kind of lay off properties or hunt them in the way that they think they want to hunt based on what the predictions are. But with the intel, the AI piece is not something that's telling you if you should hunt or not. It more or less tells you how aggressive you should be when hunting, or how aggressive you might need to be while hunting.
I got you.
So that's a long answer to say the market just didn't respond to things like I thought they would. And like anything else I've done in my life, when I thought I knew the answer, it turns out I didn't.
I think that's all of us. I think it's even, you can chalk that up to like habitat and land management, and the things that I do, like things that you think are going to make the biggest impact, like we're nothing in comparison to something little, or even, a hunting strategy or whatever. Like I just changed how I, obviously access is a big thing, but it's like me changing access from this point to 50 yards away made all the difference in the world. I think that's pretty much the pathway everyone sees. So yeah, the journal feature I like too. That was one little thing too that I always was like, man, I wish there was an easy way to kind of, track harvests and stuff like that, because a lot of times, I can go back, like I got an iPhone, I can go back and look at the photo, swipe up, get the date, get the time and stuff. But then you got to go back and kind of do a lot of what was the pressure like? What was the temperature? What was the temperature like the past couple of days surrounding that? Right. So for me, going in here, and I just, went through, I think a couple of days ago, and the 2 deer that I shot this year, putting everything on there, looking at it now. I mean, yeah, it gave me the weather, what it was like that day, what the wind was, the humidity, the UV index, dew point, visibility, pressure. I mean, what I harvested with, I can add photos and show it off, that kind of stuff. I mean, that's a pretty cool feature that, especially someone like me who does a lot of hunting between deer, pheasant, waterfowl. Like I got upland dogs, so I like to, take them out, and just to be able to look at those conditions and not have to have 4 different applications. Looking at the app store going, okay, let's find some hunting journal that I can download to keep these photos or whatever, and put the data in. And okay, now I got to go to NOAA, or something and do that. Just having everything again here in one platform is really good. So that was another thing that, was maybe a little thing that was, I don't know how much people are really going to make a big deal about that. But for me, I thought that was really big.
Well, there's 2 things there. We're going to make that a lot more robust over the spring. We're going to be adding our artificial intelligence prediction into that. We're going to be able to set reminders so you can get reminded of dates of hunts and stuff like that. And then later in the year, we'll make it so you can print everything out from there pretty easily too. And then what we're sorry, I'm getting messages here.
Oh,
in the
you're fine.
I'm going to turn my alerts off. But the other thing that we're going to be doing in there as well, on top of the AI, on top of the alerts and the photos, is making it, changing a couple of things from the presentation standpoint, so that it's easy to sort through and search through data and find things. Like if you're like, oh, I know I saw this 4-point in this area, we're coming up with like a Gmail labeling system, so you'll be able to get back and easily access that historical data. But then on top of that, journaling for me, and why journaling was important, is because every hyper successful deer hunter I've ever ran into, without exception, especially public land guys, are prolific journalers.
Oh yeah.
It's the common denominator among all hunters that I know, is that they write down and are very diligent with everything that they do.
Now, is there any way, and I don't know this, I'm just, like I told you in the beginning, just genuine, curiosity. Is there any way or any plans in the future to do what, kind of some other companies have tried to do with like trail camera data, like incorporate that and merge that in, and being able to map that and do what you're saying, say, hey, you know what? I do a trail camera survey at the end of August every year, and I've got this hit buck. It's a 12-point. I'm going to name him, whatever. And being able to say, hey, have I seen that buck any other times, and be able to cue that data?
Yeah, I'm actually working through the minutia of a deal that will help us do that right now. So I'm guessing by the next time that we talk, we'll be linked up with
nice.
Some stuff that is going to allow it's going to make cameras and all of that stuff associated with that peripheral data and the integration of that peripheral data, but then also educating our AIs about that data for future predictions. Yes, all of that's being worked right now in the background. And yes, we're going to be releasing some capability that I think is really going to knock people's socks off.
Yeah, because something like that too, again, selfishly, with this research project I have going on, one of the impacts that we're also going to be looking at, just because we're going to have cameras up on every one of these nesting structures, is looking at, the predator implications. If I put a hen house, nesting structure out on the water, elevated, that's drastically going to reduce, the predatory, impacts that's going to happen, versus on an upland area. So that's why I was asking, because something like that, I could go through and be like, hey, these are my cameras that are linked up. It would be awesome to be able like, okay, show me everything of a raccoon, that was tagged, and I can go, yeah. So the nerdy research guy in me starts kind of getting excited for stuff like that. Everyone who's hunters,
and that's really who I build the really esoteric functionality like that for, is the guys who really geek out on getting into this data, into the nitty gritty, which I am the same way.
Awesome. So as we start wrapping this up, because I know we got a time crunch here, I'm going to ask before I forget, any plans for an iPad version?
Yeah, I'm building it right now.
Yes.
So I've literally got an iPad right here.
Awesome.
And right now you can launch it and see it on an iPad, but it doesn't scale well. So I'm fixing that. I'll be demoing the iPad stuff at NWTF.
Oh, nice.
People will be able to get on there, and it'll be an improved version for the iPad. And yeah, we are doing that. And it's also on the desktop computer right now as well.
Yeah, I do so much on my iPad, and I was like, I was playing around with it on the iPad, but I figured it was coming, but I wanted to see when
it's on the way.
Awesome. So I think, generally I try to wrap up, when I was thinking about this is, hey, what do you got coming down the future? But I think you've hit a lot of stuff of what you guys are working on, and I'm excited about it. I think
our big muscle movement is this Western tag stuff that's coming out here soon, and Blue Force Tracker. We'll have some LiDAR maps and stuff that we're putting up as well very soon.
Oh, okay.
All of that within about 6 weeks.
Now, the LiDAR maps, will those be under the options where the other 4 are, like the SAT, the hybrid?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Exactly.
All right. Well, you know what? I know we got the time crunch. We'll get this wrapped up, and I'm sure we're going to be talking again, because as you release new features and, I want to keep talking about this, and I think it's something that as they come out, I think people are going to be definitely interested in, and try to get it out there as much as they can, because I'm a big fan.
Happy to talk whenever, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate you having me on.
All right, man. Everybody, we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you soon.